What's up, guys? My name is Ted, and welcome back to another episode of my new YouTube podcast on the Idaho 4. This is part 2 of Ethan Was Immobilized and why Ethan never left the bed. So let's pick back up where we left off on my 2 a.m. is a dark hour timeline and get right into it. In part 1 of Ethan Was Immobilized and why Ethan never left the bed, we had left off in this theory and timeline at approximately 2:17 a.m. We believe that Mr. Chapin was attacked and immediately neutralized as a physical threat on the bed, likely by a couple of male assailants, delivering a series of devastating blows to both legs. So let's quickly examine and discuss these injuries in a little more detail. I realize this particular imagery is graphic, so extreme apologies. I do not plan to make displays of each and every autopsy, but only highlight those wounds along the way that I feel are critical in understanding the full scope of these attacks pursuant to the 2 a.m. timeline. On examination of this graphic, we can see a series of injuries to the lower extremities, the most prevalent being a gaping wound complex on the rear left leg, which basically dismantled his hamstring and use of his left leg entirely. Then, on the right leg, we see major damage to both his knee and calf muscle. It's quite easy to see how these wounds were delivered with intention, but also extreme precision. So what does this tell us about his attackers? First, these wounds suggest premeditation and planning, and that the alternate perpetrators knew Ethan, along with the other 3 victims, were inside 1122 King upon entry, and that Mr. Chapin was undoubtedly a target. Second, these wounds clearly suggest a prerequisite skill level. These attackers clearly understood Gray's anatomy and had likely used knives quite frequently in the past. The full spectrum of the autopsy data does not suggest novice killers. Third, it's extremely important to note that these injuries were not intended to end Mr. Chapin immediately, but rather to render him unable to stand, walk, or essentially leave the bed. Based on the approximate entry time of 2:17 a.m. and the final horrific male scream heard at 2:27 a.m. Sadly, we believe Ethan was likely kept alive on the bed while Xana was being savagely tortured and ended just a few feet away from him. Lastly, let's discuss the hair in Ethan's right hand. Does this hair belong to an alternate perpetrator? And was it pulled out during the struggle on his bed in the 2 a.m. hour? We know Ethan sustained brutal injuries to his scalp on both sides of his head, and also injuries to his hands prior to his fatal wounds. Were these hand injuries classic defensive wounds, or perhaps a result of Mr. Chapin's efforts to grab the knife and or reach at the assailant's face and head? Hence the resulting hair in his right hand. We know this hair does not belong to Mr. Koberger. So whose is it?